Our idea was that people could use this book to flip through. It's made for, not necessarily for botanists. It's organized by habitat type, so most people know if they're in a swamp versus a regular forest versus a pine forest, and that's kind of how we separated it out. Okay, and Dr. Connor couldn't be here today. He's in Nicaragua with his family. But he's grateful that you guys invited us to come, and he's a wonderful guy to work with, And so, as already was mentioned, when I was moving to this area, I came in on 17 over the bridges and saw the longleaf pine forests. My master's thesis was in longleaf pine. So I have a particular fondness for it, and I recognized right away that this place was special, because this tree right here was the old stately tree. I just went and took a bunch of pictures of it, but it was old, craggy, scraggly, really big old tree, and it's since died. It was hit by lightning, which brings us to the fire. Longleaf pine forests are fire evolved, and so when you don't have the fire happening, you don't have the nice understory. Hardwoods start coming in, and this one is nicely maintained. Typically they have to burn them every 2 to 5 years. The longer it gets, the more hardwoods you're going to get in there, shrubs and oaks and sweet gums. Sweet gums are bad. Okay, and so one of the great things about longleaf pine is when you have a healthy longleaf pine stand, the understory is really amazing. It's got the highest species diversity of any of the habitats in temperate zone. You can find, I think it's 120 species in a square meter. And a meter, is about 3 feet by 3 feet. And the other cool thing, because it's fire evolved, this plant, that's a pine tree. That's a baby longleaf pine. When they generate, or when they start to grow, they first look like a big bunch of grass. And this is because it's specially evolved so that when the fire comes over, you can see the edges, the end part of the needles, that holds extra water. And they've done research on this actually, where as the fire goes over, those pine needles being gathered there keep that pine tree alive. That's where every plant has an apical meristem, and that's where this one's apical meristem is. And so it can survive the fire. As soon as the fire goes through, it just rockets up, and they call them rocket trees, or you can see them down here. These are some of the ones that have been burned, and now they just shoot up because they want to get up high enough where if another fire comes through, they won't be killed. So it's a really cool system. And unfortunately, historically, it covered 90 million acres. It went all the way from southern Virginia out to Texas. There are even mountain habitats with longleaf pine in northern Alabama and Georgia. And then you can go down into the sand hills in South Florida. Well, I don't think it goes all the way to the very south. But yeah, so it goes into Florida. What we're looking at here, Hobcaw Barony is where the star is. And you can see that South Carolina has a great diversity of landform regions, everything from the mountains down to the coastal zone. And longleaf pine occurs in all of those. So it's an amazing system. There's a lot of it in Francis Marion. There are, I believe, 27 federally listed species associated with longleaf pine habitats. And that's because when I said it was 90 million acres, there's less than 5% of it where the ground cover is intact, and that's where the diversity is. And when you have healthy ground cover, you have things like red cockaded woodpeckers and special salamanders and toads and plants, Schwabia americana, chaff seed, which they have some in the Francis Marion. And then I wanted to put this in here so people could see kind of the lay of the land of hobcaw. So this green area, that's the terrestrial part. And then this little bit darker or yellower green are the marshes. And you have this is Winyaw Bay. And so hobcaw has everything. It has sand hills that run down the middle. King's Highway goes right through the middle, and it runs down the ancient sand dune that's there. So they have sand hills, and then goes all the way out to maritime forests and beaches, because they own this, I believe it's 3 or 4 miles, the southern part of that beach. And that was one of the fun trips. I got to go through Deberdew and go out onto the beach to look for a plant that I had discovered, and I wanted to see if there was an occurrence out there, and there was. So the most important thing for this system is fire. You can't stress that enough. The habitat, it kind of breaks my heart when I drive through them because there's not a lot of burning happening, and you can see like the evergreen shrubs and hardwoods are really getting big out there. So, and hopefully there won't be a wildfire in this area, because a lot of those evergreen shrubs are pyrogenic, which means they have chemicals in their leaves that actually make them burn hotter and faster. And there's a couple of areas where when I drive by, I just always think, please don't let somebody throw a cigarette out there, because that's gonna go up. So it's a beautiful system. It's easy to walk through if you're in a healthy one, because there aren't hardly any shrubs. And I'm just going to go through the various types that we have on hobcaw, and then I'll get into some of the interesting plants that I found in places I got to see. And please just, if it gets to be too late, stop me, because I get carried away when I'm talking about these plants. But so I put some of my favorites up here. This Asclepias pedicellata is savanna milkweed, but it's really found more in sandy soils. And then this is another milkweed that's found in sandy soils. And I don't know if you've seen, they've got big green leaves with purple veins. It's a really beautiful plant. Monarchs love them. I don't know if you know anything about the genus, species, naming convention that scientists follow, but they have similar characteristics in their flowers, how the flowers are structured. Currently, there's a new key that's being developed, and they're going into a lot of genetics, and so they're splitting out a lot of species. But it's pretty interesting to read some of the stuff, like things that are actually related to one another that people would never have thought were related. Like Spanish moss is related to pineapple. Who'd have thought? So, and these are just a few more of the ones that I love. The horse mint is up here. Carphephorus, that one's called deer tongue. That's another Asclepias. Asclepias is one of my favorite families because the flower to me reminds me of an alien spaceship that's landing. And it's just very cool. This is another Asclepias. That one's got very big clasping leaves. We're moving into the pine woodlands, which would be not quite as dry as the sand hills, but not as wet as the savanna. So you have a cohort of species there that are different than what you see up in the sandhills. And another structural difference, the sandhills will have open patches of sandy soil. Once you get into the pine woodlands, the savannas, it's going to be a dense cover of grasses. Some of the species of grass require people didn't, the research I did was on wiregrass, and it was just when people had discovered that if you burned, nobody knew how it produced by seed. And then they discovered if you burned it in hot months, because quail plantations always burned in the fall, in the winter. And so just scientists thought, well, we're going to try this in the summer, because really, if lightning is the cause of the fire, then it would be a summer burn more likely than a winter burn. And so when they did that, then the wiregrass flowered and it created viable seed. And we got to look at how far it would distribute from the clumps and all that great stuff. This is one of my favorites too. This one used to be called Polyglot Grandiflora, but they just recently changed the genus that it's in. And it always has reminded me of a little orchid, but it's not, it's a polygola. And so this is just kind of showing you how the genus species works and some of the characteristics that you might look for. These are all liatris. Gayflower, I think, is one of the common names for it. Oh, and in the book I do mostly common names. We start with the common name because we want people to be able to relate to it. A lot of people don't really care for the scientific names. If you want them, they're there. But we tried to have it go for people to just enjoy looking at the pictures and seeing the common names. So the difference that you can see between these liatrices are these bracts that come up at the bottom. So the first thing that you're looking at if you're a botanist identifying these flowers are these bracts and how it's connected to the branch, the main stem. Squarosa, that species specific, the species epithet is, that word means turning down. And it refers to how as they get older, then the bracts will just start sagging down. And you see how much longer these are, and they protrude. But then the flowers look very similar. They're tubular, aster-like flowers. This one, the bracts are thicker. They don't have a membrane around the margin. These have a membrane around the margin. You can kind of see it. You might not be able to see it from where you are, but you can see it in this picture. It's right on the edge. It's a light pink margin. And this one up here, the bracts have a gland at the tip. And I typically always have my 10x magnifying lens on my neck so I can look for these things. And again, I did it with false foxglove. This is a cool plant that you find all over in the pine woodlands that is a host plant to buckeye butterflies. You probably have seen them around. They're not that big, but they have an eyeball. It looks like an eye on the wing. And this is the larvae of that. So they eat that like crazy. And if you see a batch like this and come back in a week or two, the leaves are gonna all be gone because they love that stuff. And then when we get to the flatwoods and savannas, again, it's going to be really dense vegetation. It's going to be made up of grasses. And the three over there are not very common. You don't see those all the time, but you probably recognize the Muhlenbergia capillaris. That's one that people use horticulturally because it's pretty. You see how it looks all fanny and red. And then the grass clumps are very showy. This one here is a red chokecherry. That's a pine lily. Those are very unusual, but they have them on Hobcaw. And then that's a orange fringe orchid. You can see that if you want to see it, it grows in a ditch that I love to go visit at different times of the year. That's, oh gosh, out by the HGTC. Is it Pennyroyal? That road. It's got amazing wildflowers on the one side. Okay, so, and this one here is very common. It's called sunbonnet, And it's got very distinctive leaves where they're very furry on the underside, and they grow spread out. They're basally distributed, and they grow straight out, and then the flower just shoots up early spring, and you'll see patches of these. They're really pretty. And so they also have some moist hardwood forest. Most of this was around where I think there was an old graveyard, because it hadn't been burned, and that's why it had sort of transitioned over into the wetter species. And so we have things like Monada punctata, which is, it doesn't have any chlorophyll. It's a parasitic plant, and its flowering structure, actually, it puts it in the same family as blueberry. So I'm going to guess that they're going to do genetics and end up moving that somewhere else. But so yeah, that one's Indian pipe is what it's commonly called. Then you have buckeye. That's the red buckeye. Had to put that in there for my friend, Nancy. And then you have beautyberry, dogwood, and down in the corner there, that's called bear corn is the common name, and it's a Scrophulariaceae, which is the flower structure similar to like a foxglove, so it's kind of tubular. And that one also is it's parasitic on oak trees. Both of these, you have to be in oak forests to find them, or at least have some kind of oaks around. They also have some amazing freshwater ponds and marshes. And one of the cool things about longleaf pine is it especially that I found on Hobcaw, was that within a small area, you can have a number of different habitat types. Because the soil, I guess it's because it goes from sandy all the way down to the ocean, and then it's also been disturbed so frequently that you have little ridges and valleys, and you see differences. These freshwater seasonally flooded areas are amazing for plant diversity and for amphibian diversity, and we've lost a lot of the freshwater ponds and marshes. I would put what are Carolina bays, if anybody is familiar with those. Carolina bays would be considered one of these freshwater pond types that typically would have been found in longleaf pine and would have been burned occasionally, which keeps the shrubs out, and it makes it stay perfect for some of these cool amphibians. So these were all, again, taken on Hobcaw, in that they have two particularly nice freshwater ponds that I would always go back to, because one of the things that I love are insectivorous plants. I think the next one might have, yeah. Swamps and sloughs, they look monocultural a lot of the time, but early in the spring, when the sun can get down to the floor of the forest, you'll find orchids. This up here is the Utricularia, and that one really looks like a spaceship, because it's got like, I don't know if you can really see it too good on this slide, but it has a star sort of structure that keeps it floating. The tips of the stars are sort of inflated, and its specific epithet is actually inflata, because of those inflated tips. But the way that it eats insects is, it has these little cups that hang down in the water. So it's floating on top of the water, and it has little cups that are hanging down, and as little, you know, larvae and microorganisms are swimming by, they hit a trigger. There are little hairs at the opening, and that makes it pop open, and it sucks the bugs in. So that's how they get their nitrogen. It's a very cool plant.
How do you say that second word again? Swamps and what?
Sloughs.
Sloughs, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then we had the dunes and maritime, and that, I just loved their habitat that they had out there. They have a big, I don't know if people might have been out there on the trips, because they do take tours out there, and you get to just walk down the beach. But they have a dune at the end, the south end, that's very high. It's probably 20, 25 feet high. So it's amazing views. You can just look all around. But the cool thing, why I wanted to get permission to go there, was because this little plant down here, Trichostema, it's a type of mint. So it's got very fragrant leaves, and that flowering structure is pretty typical for a mint. If you notice the light color of these anthers, that's what distinguished this one. When I was keying this one out, the first time I saw it was in Huntington Beach State Park, and it wouldn't key out. It wouldn't go to a species because of those yellow anthers. So I called my friend that works with DNR here in the state, and he said, "Oh, yeah, that's a new species. They just named that 2 weeks ago." And I said, I could have been named a plant. So, yes, I was so close and yet so far. But that was very exciting, and it's since been added to the new keys that Dr. Weekly's working on out of North Carolina, University of North Carolina. And again, I just loved, the beach is just amazing. And then they have a lot of salt and brackish marshes, estuary types. I liked the picture in the back because it shows the gradient of salt. These are the really high salt flats. They call them pans, and they're mostly salicornias. So it's a little, almost like a succulent looking plant. And people actually grow them and sell them for like a salad part. They're salty. I don't like how they taste, but some people like it. But yeah, that's in the high salt areas. And then you have when you go up just a little bit more, then you start seeing the sea lavender, which is this one with the little pretty purple flowers. And then you'll go up a little further and you'll see the sea oxeye. That's a daisy that grows. This is it, the green leaves back in the back here with the black rush, needle rush mixed in with it. So as you move to areas that are higher, you get different plants. And it's just really cool to see. And as you look out further and you see the taller green grass, that's the what used to be Spartina, but they've changed that to Sporobolus. So, and these are, again, showing that gradient, how you have fresh to salt to less salty. You know, this one, the black, this one here is cut grass is the common name, and it's in an area that's called Thousand Acre Swamp, or not swamp. Anyway, it's a huge open area that was a rice field, and it's got a levee that goes right through the middle of it. So on one side you have this, because the levee blocks the saltiest water from getting in, and the other side you have this, where it goes into Spartina, well, Sporobolus and black rush and the salty plants. So it's kind of cool. And this again is more of that, showing that gradient. This is the black needle rush. You can see it go from Spartina. Spartina grows in different forms depending on where you see it in the salt gradient. And so you have some short in the front, and then where the soil goes up a bit, you're seeing needle rush, and then you go back to Spartina because it gets salty again. Oh, my thank you slide's not there. Well, I was gonna say thank you for inviting me. I thought I had put it on there, but thank you for inviting me. I as you can tell, I get very excited about plants, and you're welcome to buy a book. Dr. Connor took care of the publishing part, so I can't really answer any questions about how it was published, but you can find it on Amazon as well, and they sell it at the Visitor Center at Hobcaw as well. Oh, you guys have it here? Oh, right. Oh, yes. Dr. Connor gave me some books, and it's if you'd like to get a copy, it's a nice picture book to flip through. So, if you're interested, I have them back there, and I think he said they're $17 a piece. So, thank you guys. Any questions? Yeah. Any
Maureen,
questions?
A couple of questions I have. One is, you mentioned, for instance, Pennyroyal and up to the state park. Obviously, it's not just Hobcaw. This is a regional kind of celebration of the flowers.
Oh, yeah. All the pictures are taken on Hobcaw because I wanted to be sure that everything I put in the book for being on Hobcaw is there. But yes, this type of habitat goes, you can find it in North Carolina and down into Georgia. This similar type of habitat.
So this is really a book on coastal
Yes.
wildflowers.
Pretty much.
The best of them being found at Hobcaw.
Yeah. I don't know. There are some ditches around here that, whew, they're exciting.
And I'll be the photos are beautiful and very helpful. And again, being able to give the different environments in which it's located is very, very helpful.
In hindsight, I didn't know anything about the publishing, but if we could have done more of a high definition, I don't know if that's even possible. It would have, because I tried to take pictures showing the characteristics that differentiated different species. Like there are certain things that you can just look for that jump out at you, and then every time you see it, you'll know, oh, that's partridge pea or whatever. So.
And my other question is, when are you going to start giving the tours?
I think we're doing one in March. Dr. Connor and I with the Hobcaw people. So yeah, I don't know if they have it on their website or how they're actually gonna do that, but we've already said that we'd be happy to do a March wildflower walk. And I did one back in the fall too, before it was the first week this book was out. They were having a wildflower walk, and I just called and said, can I tag along? And they said I could, so of course I had to go be nosy.
So through Maureen and William, we'll make sure we get word out when that comes along, because that would just be wonderful. You know, it's one of those things you don't look, and this helps you look and to see the magnificence of one of the other dimensions of our community.
Yes, it's a beautiful spot. We're fortunate to have that.
So what's your next book project?
I don't really know. I mean, there are probably over 1,000 species. I mean, we could make that into a gigantic book. If you include grasses and lichens and things of that nature, then you're really going to have even bigger numbers. So yeah, it's an amazing spot.
Wow. Wonderful. Maureen, thank you very, very much. I heard you hanging get them signed today, right?
I guess, yeah. I would be amazed. I'm not.
My thanks to all of you for a wonderful evening. This has been great. Glad to have you here. God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you.